Hello, learned and astonishingly attractive pupils. My name is John Green, and I want to welcome you to Crash Course World History. Over the next 40 weeks, together we will learn about how in a mere 15,000 years, humans went from hunting and gathering to...
Wrong script.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Jonah.
And I'm Ishan.
And this is Crash Course Modern Middle East.
Our first topic will be Iran.
Before the 20th century, there was no Iran. Instead, what we know as Iran today was actually referred to by another name, Persia. Let's go to the thought bubble. Persian rule traces a long history back to the Achaemenid Empire, founded by the first ruler of Persia, Cyrus the Great. No, not that Cyrus. This Cyrus. Although they were both pretty great. Anyway, the Achaemenid Empire laid the foundation for over 2,500 years of continuous Persian monarchy, although the monarchs came for a variety of dynasties. Since then, many changes have taken place in the region's society.
Let's fast forward 1,000 years to the more recent past. Considered to be one of the most significant empires in the Persian region, the Safavid Empire represented the changes which took place in Persian society. For one, the predominant religion of the Safavid Empire was Shia Islam. This choice of faith was contrary to the official religions of many of the Safavids' neighbors, such as the Sunni Ottoman Empire, or the Orthodox Christian Russian Empire. After the Safavids came the Qajar dynasty. However, although under new rule, Persia retained its religion and culture.
Beginning in 1925, a new dynasty came to power, the Pahlavis. Founded by Reza Shah Pahlavi, the new government began to call itself not Persia, but instead by the name we know today, Iran. Iran faced a host of initial challenges. Iran at the time was under significant influence from Britain and other Western imperial powers who sought to control the region's vast oil fields. Britain in particular did this through the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which we know today as British Petroleum, or BP.
After the Soviet Union and Britain led an invasion of Iran during World War II, a new member of the royal family was crowned as Iran's last emperor, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, also known as Reza Shah's son. It's kind of weird how both the emperors had almost the same name.
Like how both the Ayatollahs are called Khomeini?
Yes, just like that. Thanks, Thought Bubble. Anyway, the new emperor's reign saw a vast array of changes. In 1953, Iran experienced a coup d'état orchestrated by Britain and the US, which overthrew Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh after the Iranian parliament voted to nationalize oil infrastructure in the country. This coup gave the emperor, known as Mohammad Reza, new authority to more strictly control his country. The ruler had been at odds with his prime minister previously. With this new authority, Mohammad Reza undertook an extensive top-down social reform program, known as the White Revolution. Mohammad Reza intended to industrialize Iran, and to ultimately set it on a path toward a modernized Western society.
However, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Mohammad Reza introduced a secret police force known as the Savak to enforce his control over Iran. Furthermore, the White Revolution created a large amount of discontent within Iranian society, especially from the clergy and other supporters of the traditional system who did not agree with the modern values enforced by the reform program. One guy in particular who didn't appreciate the new reforms was a clergyman named Ruhollah Khomeini. He'll be important later. In 1979, civil unrest boiled over into the Iranian Revolution. Like many revolutions before it, this one was intended to put an end to perceived authoritarianism on behalf of the monarch. However, unlike other revolutions, this one did not plan to implement a secular democracy. Instead, this was an Islamic revolution.
The Mongols!
Fed up with the emperor's reforms, the Iranian people largely wanted a government based on the principles of Islamic society instead of Western secular values. At the forefront of this movement was the Ayatollah Khomeini, the same Khomeini we mentioned before. The revolution created the Islamic Republic of Iran, nominally a democracy, but under the wide-reaching authority of the Ayatollah. Mohammad Reza, now deposed, eventually ended up in the United States under the Carter administration.
Mr. Kamat, what are some other important things that Carter did during his presidency?
Iranian anger at this U.S. action, combined with a deep-seated hatred for the influence of American culture, led to the storming of the American embassy and the ensuing Iranian hostage crisis.
Relations between the U.S. and Iran haven't improved much since. Sanctions on Iran by America and other Western countries have limited the growth of the Iranian economy, and an arms embargo on Iran has been another factor in this divided geopolitical landscape. In 2015, the Obama administration, along with Britain, France, China, Russia, and Germany, struck a deal with Iran known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or simply the JCPOA. At that time, Iran had begun to develop the infrastructure necessary to refine impure uranium into the purities necessary for nuclear fission. This is the first step any country must take in the development of a nuclear weapons program. Iran claimed that they were using the equipment for the development of nuclear energy, but the West was largely skeptical.
The JCPOA was intended to end this development. Essentially, it stated that as long as Iran passed UN-organized checks to ensure that it was not developing nuclear weapons, the other signatories would ease economic sanctions. The immediate aftermath of the deal was economic relief for Iran and peace of mind for the international community. However, critics of the JCPOA claim that the deal did not cover other areas of Iran's military development, such as ballistic missiles. Furthermore, some claim that Iran began using its increased revenue from sanctions relief to meddle in the affairs of other countries in the Middle East, such as in the Syrian and Yemeni civil wars. They point to Hezbollah, a group known for doing Iran's dirty work among other things, as proof of this relationship. In 2018, President Donald Trump backed out of the JCPOA and reinstituted American sanctions on Iran, even though Iran had been complying with all checks and measures. The other signatories remained part of the deal, Iran included. As a consequence, the US has turned more toward Iran's regional opponents to counter the country's influence. Such countries include Saudi Arabia, one of Iran's most prominent rivals.
Speaking of, let's talk about Saudi Arabia.
Basically, the only important thing in Saudi Arabia was the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Moving on.
Mr. Kamat, what about everything else?
Alright, former me, let's begin with some background information. Saudi Arabia is a monarchy. Currently, the official ruler is King Salman.
But nah, he's long gone, and his son, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, is the de facto leader of Saudi Arabia. As the crown prince, MBS has undertaken efforts to modernize the Saudi economy. He has tried to diversify Saudi holdings in the technology and service sectors. He's also tried to weed out corruption within the Saudi royal family. Famously, he held many of his family members in a Ritz-Carlton and interrogated them about bribery charges.
Although he has begun modernization efforts, Saudi Arabia still largely adheres to a strict interpretation of Sunni Islam. This belief system is known as Wahhabism. As Iran fell to revolutionaries, the Saudi royal family, fearing a similar revolution against the monarchy in their own country, cracked down on dissent. This largely manifested in the growth of Wahhabism, and the Saudi government supports this by providing funding to Wahhabi schools. In addition to being competing regional military and economic powers, the differences between Sunni and Shia Islam is another way in which Saudi Arabia and Iran are diametrically opposed.
Wahhabism also shares a belief which is prevalent in other interpretations of Islam, Sharia law. Sharia law holds that individuals should live their lives according to the principles of Islam, just as the Prophet Muhammad did when he was alive. In practice, this can disenfranchise women, as they might not be allowed to do many tasks without being accompanied by their husband. All countries which implement Sharia law have different interpretations of how strict and how fundamentalist it should be. In the case of Saudi Arabia, the answer to both of these questions is very.
In 2017, the Saudi government allowed women to drive, undoing a long-standing symbol of female oppression in this country after international and domestic pressure swayed opinions. Saudi Arabia also recently opened its first movie theater in April of 2018. The first film shown was Black Panther. It's evident that MBS is pushing for some level of liberalization of Saudi society. However, the recent murder of Jamal Khashoggi proves that they have a long way to go if they want to.
Ishan, we promised Mr. Paula we wouldn't go on about that.
I'm sorry. Sometimes it just gets the best of me. Anyway, let's discuss Saudi Arabia's involvement in the Yemeni civil war.
That seems like a good idea to me. Saudi Arabia has been a consistent backer of the central government in Yemen since the beginning of the civil war, and they have supported President Hadi's forces with airstrikes and other military campaigns. The central government is fighting against the Houthi rebels, who are suspected to be aligned with Iran. Naturally, this is the perfect storm for Saudi-Iranian tensions to play out.
Saudi actions in Yemen have drawn widespread criticism. Saudi aircraft have been observed bombing indiscriminately, and many Yemeni civilians have been caught in the crossfire of the civil war. Furthermore, Saudi Arabia has blocked UN medical aid shipments from arriving at ports in Yemen. They claim that the supplies will only be used to support the rebel Houthis.
To understand what this means in context, we should explain the origins of the Yemeni civil war.
I agree. Let's go to the thought bubble.
The civil war in Yemen traces its roots to the Arab Spring, an anti-authoritarian wave of revolutions which swept the Middle East beginning in 2010. In 2011, then-President Saleh was toppled from his position as dictator after an uprising supported by the Houthis, a Shia organization from the country's northwest. President Hadi was appointed to lead the government after a transitional period.
However, even though the Houthis were a major group in Yemen, they were not represented in the central government, despite their contribution to the revolution. After realizing that the new government was just as neglectful to them as the old one, Houthi protest turned into military conflict. Houthi forces seized Yemen's capital, Sana'a, in 2015. They have chosen as their leader the former President Saleh, the same one they helped overthrow. The central government has fled to the port city of Aden, and they continue the war with military assistance from Saudi Arabia.
Violence in Yemen has been drawn out since then. Civilians have taken most of the hit. It is estimated that about 130 children die each day, and almost 85,000 children have died of hunger since the war began in March of 2015. The worst humanitarian crisis in the world is getting worse each day. Unfortunately, it does not seem like there will be a speedy resolution.
And thanks, Apple. Now it's time for the mystery document.
The rules here are simple. Either we guess the author of the mystery document right, or Ishan gets shocked. Let's see what we got.
Wait, why me?
The longer this cruel war lasts in Yemen, the more permanent the damage will be. The people of Yemen will be busy fighting poverty, cholera, and water scarcity and rebuilding their country. The crown prince must bring an end to the violence and restore the dignity of the birthplace of Islam.
I'm gonna go with Mohammed bin Salman.
Are you serious? I'll have you know that the real author of this document is Genghis Khan.
The Mongols!
Let's flip it over to see which one of us is right.
Oh, it's Jamal Khashoggi.
Oh no. Wait, this isn't a shock, Ben.
Yeah, we don't have the budget for that.
Anyway, just like in Yemen, the Arab Spring as a whole began with hopes for success, but it soon ended in a series of failures. Kind of like my high school career. A prime example of this is Syria, where Bashar al-Assad is still attempting to reclaim land lost to rebels after a civil war broke out in 2011.
This horrible conflict has led to more than 5 million refugees, 2.4 million of them children. The UN estimates that around 400,000 people have died in the Syrian civil war.
Assad's government currently has the upper hand in the war. His pro-government forces, backed by Russia, have taken back the majority of lost territory. Currently, the only remaining land controlled by rebels is a region in northern Syria surrounding the city of Idlib.
Many terrorist groups have taken advantage of the conflict to expand their influence in the region. The issue is further compounded when Assad's government ordered the release of extremists from Syrian prisons. The thought process was that foreign powers, which might otherwise support the rebels against the Assad government, would instead condemn the actions of the extremist anti-government forces.
Assad's plan to avoid foreign involvement in Syria largely failed. The civil war has become a flashpoint for many international tensions, both within the Middle East and around the world. Examples of these conflicts include Saudi Arabia versus Iran and the US versus Russia.
Speaking of Iran and terrorist groups, let's move to Hezbollah.
Mr. Peskov, what is a Hezbollah?
Oh, former me, you were so stupid before you took modern Middle East. It is believed that Hezbollah, Iran's hammer, is backing the Houthi forces in Yemen and Assad's government in Syria. Hezbollah, or the Party of God, was founded in the 1980s with the help of Iran and has aided Iran ever since. Hezbollah is a Shia organization, hence its close relationship with Iran. This makes them one of the few Shiite terrorist organizations in the Middle East. We will cover some of the Sunni groups later in this film.
In return for helping Iran in its endeavors, Hezbollah received funds from Iran to pay for schools, hospitals, and troop facilities. Hezbollah has inserted itself in many issues in the Middle East, such as in the Syrian civil war, where they help defend holy sites and fight terrorism.
Hezbollah also has many troops in Lebanon to fight Israel. Elimination of Israel is one of Hezbollah's primary goals. They do not recognize Israel as a legitimate entity. In 2006, Hezbollah, with support from Iran, engaged in a 34-day-long armed conflict with Israel. There was no clear victor, and the conflict between the two continues to this day.
Another terrorist organization in the Middle East is Al-Qaeda. Let's go to the thought bubble.
Before we go to the thought bubble, can we talk about all of the important events surrounding Kuwait book banning?
Sure! Let's go to the thought bubble. On September 11th, 2001, hijackers associated with Al-Qaeda committed acts of terror on the World Trade Center. This event brought al-Qaeda to the forefront of American foreign policy, and it cemented the name in the minds of Americans as a symbol of terrorism.
Al-Qaeda originally began as the Mujahideen during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Since it was founded in 1988 by Osama bin Laden, it has grown into a terrorist organization which operates across the Middle East in conflict zones such as Yemen and Syria. Today, the group is run by Ayman al-Zawahiri. Although the Mujahideen was originally a fledgling Afghan resistance group during the Soviet invasion, the United States provided the Mujahideen with armaments to counter the Soviet influence. These arms supplies were a factor in the ultimate victory of the Mujahideen over the Soviet Union. Thanks, Thought Bubble.
Mr. Pezikov, does that mean the U.S. funded al-Qaeda?
Moving on. Another major terrorist organization is the Taliban.
The Taliban is a group of holy warriors that came to power during the Afghan Civil War. The organization has been heavily criticized for their treatment of women, support of terrorist organizations, and for stealing rocks from state parks.
After holding 90% of Afghanistan and then being forced out in 2004, the Taliban is making a unique resurgence. The Taliban set up a parallel government that sees over it with a watchful eye. Many civilians describe the Taliban's rule as spooky, as if a shadow is cast upon them.
Another group attempting to create a parallel government is ISIS in Iraq and Syria.
ISIS, also known as Daesh, was formed as an offshoot from al-Qaeda and reached its peak in late 2015 when it occupied much of both Iraq and Syria. Known for its violence, Daesh became a symbol of fear for many Americans because of released videos of graphic murders and suicide bombings.
Moving westward, let's investigate Hamas, our final terrorist organization in the Middle East.
But, before we talk about Hamas, we should probably discuss the long-standing friendship between Hamas and Israel. Let's go to the thought bubble. Israel was created in 1948 as a result of UN Resolution 181, after Britain abandoned its mandate over the Palestine area. Eventually, Israel began making settlements and expanding into Palestine and other neighboring countries. After the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel had control over the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the Gaza Strip, and much of Palestine.
When Egypt tried to take back the Sinai in 1973, they attacked on Yom Kippur, the most important Jewish holiday of the year. Israel obliterated the Egyptian forces and kept Egypt out of the Sinai. However, much tension still remained.
To alleviate this, President Carter in 1978 invited Egypt's President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin into Camp David, a presidential retreat. Israel agreed to return the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt, and in return, Egypt recognizes the assistance of Israel.
Additionally, there was a peace agreement between the two, which required respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence. Thanks, Thought Bubble. While the Camp David Accords addressed some of the issues between Israel and Egypt, the future of Palestine still remained unclear. Although Israel had given up sizable amounts of territory in exchange for peace, the West Bank and Gaza Strip were still under Israeli control. Because of the new borders which resulted from the various wars involving Israel, the West Bank and Gaza had become split into two distinct regions. The Palestinian population was unhappy with this situation, to say the least. Beginning in 1987 and ending in 1993, the first Intifada, or uprising, took the lives of 1,000 Palestinians and injured over 3,000 Jews. The Oslo Accords, signed in 1995, were an attempt at peace between Palestine and Israel. However, the accords ultimately ended in failure, and a second Intifada occurred from 2000 to 2005 after a Jew provocatively visited the Temple Mount. To understand the situation in Palestine, it's important to understand the various organizations which play their part in the region. Let's go to the thought bubble. The Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, was formed in 1964 with the stated goal of liberating Palestine. The organization aimed much of its campaign at Israel, whom it initially viewed as an illegitimate occupier. However, with the signing of the Oslo Accords by leader Yasser Arafat, the PLO recognized Israel's right to exist. In addition, the Oslo Accords created another organization, the PA, or Palestinian Authority, not to be confused with Pennsylvania. As of today, the PA claims control over both parts of Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza. In practice, however, the Palestinian Authority only controls the West Bank region of Palestine. This situation came about as a result of a split between rival political parties Fatah and Hamas. Fatah, a secularist party, today controls the West Bank. The leader of the PA, Mahmoud Abbas, is from Fatah. Hamas was originally elected to power in Palestine in 2006. However, the conflict with Fatah quickly led to the collapse of the unified government. Hamas seized control over the Gaza Strip, and although the PA formally dissolved the government, Hamas nevertheless retains control over Gaza to this day. Thanks, Thought Bubble.
Since Hamas split from Fatah, Israel has instituted a blockade on Gaza. This prevents many essential shipments from coming into the region. Furthermore, the blockade limits the economic productivity of Gaza. This has caused high unemployment and discontent within Gazan society. In response, Gazan people have protests at the border, often throwing rocks that they stole from state parks and other things at the border wall between Gaza and Israel. Hamas has additionally launched rockets into Israeli territory. Israel claims that these actions justify the blockade. In this way, it is self-perpetuating.
The split between Fatah and Hamas has also complicated matters for the people who live in Gaza. The PA bears responsibility for paying Gazan utility bills. However, the split has caused funding to be put on hold. This has resulted in an electricity crisis. Domestic Gazan power production cannot support the consumption demands of the people in the region. As such, many people in Gaza are left without electricity for the majority of the day. Power returns temporarily at random inconvenient hours.
In the end, Israel-Palestine represents a common trend in the Middle East. Issues come about as a result of imperialist history, violence leads to international involvement, and ultimately, nobody is really happy with the outcome. And on that happy note, thanks for watching. We'll see you second semester.